If you're starting it, are you approaching the hot season or the cold season? And some people sometimes don't understand they're approaching the cold season. These are all cities that people from the expensive cities are moving to or gravitating towards. And because of that, it's not only bringing in more tourism, but it's bringing in a lot more locals. He took a 2-bedroom, convinced them to let them split it in half and add another door. He started charging for each bedroom $1,500. So he started bringing in $6,000 when he's only paying about $3,000 in rent.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? I'm sitting here down with my good friend Serge, my accountability partner for the CEO Network. He does some phenomenal things in the real estate and the Airbnb industry. So I wanted to bring him on here, talk to him, get some pointers, get some tips, what he's been doing to show some insight and enlighten y'all about what he's been doing to make money. And so y'all can figure out how to get into the real estate game and get into the Airbnb game as well. So Serge, thank you for coming.
Yeah,
Appreciate
man,
you being
for having me, bro.
Yeah,
Thanks so much.
Man, absolutely. So with them not knowing who you quite are, let's give a little background, where you're from, what you've been doing, and why you got into real estate and Airbnb.
Yeah, man. So I'm from LA. I started in LA.
Yeah.
Born and raised in LA. I went to school there too. I went to USC to go to college. I studied business, and then I actually got into software development. And as much as I enjoyed the paycheck, I realized I still wanted to have my own business. I still wanted to do that sort of thing. So I slowly just started piling up cash, paying off my loans, and then slowly but surely, between reading a couple books, I was like, I think I could buy some real estate, and I could actually start a business doing that.
Yeah.
And yeah, long story short, that's where I'm at now. And between now working my 9 to 5 and trying to become financially free, have a couple properties, and just gonna keep pushing through.
Okay, so how long have you been doing this now?
I've been probably working as a software developer for about 6 years.
Okay.
And real estate has been 3 to 4 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So on judging on your real estates and you're looking for a certain type of properties, is there certain markets you tend to stay away from and certain ones you try to gravitate to, or how do you try to narrate that frontier right there?
I stay away from New York and California. You do not want to buy. I mean, if you can make money there, but when I was first starting off, it was one of those things where there were too expensive markets for me. Yeah. I was doing numbers, and I was like, to get in, I would have to save so much more money. So I was reading a book by Bigger Pockets, and they were a real estate investment company that's out in Denver. Okay. So I ended up applying for a job there I was like, maybe I could learn from them. So Denver was my first market. And I actually bought my first house hack there. Okay. And it was a no-brainer because as soon as I got there, the prices of homes were half the cost of LA. LA was giving people $800,000 homes. In Denver, they're about $400K, and this was pre-pandemic, so nobody was fighting for deals. The interest rates were skyrocketing, so it was like the perfect time to just find some real estate to put some money into it at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we said, we've been here in Miami now for the CEO Network and everything, and you've been out here looking for places to kind of crash at and stay at so you can be out here for a couple months. And we was downstairs talking about it a little bit. You was talking about how some of these people are doing some of their Airbnb game here, and it's a game changer. So tell us a little bit about that.
So what I've noticed now that I've been doing it for a couple of years is that Florida, South Carolina, Denver specifically, even Pittsburgh at some point, these are all cities that people from the expensive cities are moving to or gravitating towards. And because of that, it's not only bringing in more tourism, but it's bringing in a lot more locals to want to buy real estate. Yeah. So something I've noticed is that as I explore the markets and talk to other agents and talk to people that are moving here, that's the first thing they notice too, because you start seeing these sky rises go up. And they realize there's a lot of people that want to move here, and there's a lot of people that want to come visit and party here and hang out. So that's a huge way of like seeing where people are moving to, and seeing how fast the cities are growing are a great way to kind of start timing the market, because the market takes like 3 to 4 years to change. So you could get in at like the first 2 years, and then you're pretty much set.
Okay, absolutely. Because you were saying like he had 4 bedrooms.
Yeah,
and
so
he renting out every bedroom.
So I went there to kind of just try to get a bedroom to rent for myself. Yeah. But this guy apparently learned how to Airbnb Arbitrage, and what that normally is where you sign a lease with the landlord, and then you more or less convince them like, hey, let me sublease the place and put it up on Airbnb, or let me re-rent it, my own way. You get your monthly rent, you're squared away, you don't worry about the headache, and I could supercharge the customer to get some profit. So what he did is he took a 2-bedroom and he was able to convince them to let him split it in half and add another door. So he turned it into a 4-bedroom. And in doing that, he started charging for each bedroom $1,500. So he started bringing in $6,000 when he's only paying about $3,000 in rent.
Dang.
And to start and get everything set up, like each bedroom's probably only like $1,000 to $2,000 in furniture. You're just buying a bed and a desk, not too much more. So startup costs for him were probably like $8,000. So you're making back your investment in less than a year, less than half a year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's doing a great job swinging his way through it. The front desk can't find out some details, but there's money to be made if you make the right connections with the right people. He got really close with the manager. Like he took me down to meet him. They were like best friends.
Yeah.
And it's funny because he was talking to his mom. He's like, I'm with my mom. He's like, tell him I'm here. He's like, you're my only best friend. And so that they really talk that way.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you really know the people and they understand you're a business person and you're going to take care of them, they're going to extend the hand and take care of you.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that's something like when me and Niles was sitting down talking about, it's like building relationships and how to communicate to people that can help move you forward in certain situations. And that's a prime example of that, of building up a relationship with somebody, because a lot of people's not able to do that.
No, it's difficult, especially if you're not confident, kind of talking to strangers and stuff like that. Sometimes you just, I find it like the best way I've done it, because I used to struggle with it back in the day, is finding a point of interest. And that's the same thing whether it's for business, for girls, for anything. It's like the moment you find the thing of interest. What college did they go to? Oh, they've been to college. I could relate to a few things about college. What cities have you traveled to? Oh, you've been here. Oh, I've been there. Or like, this guy, started asking him, I'm like, oh, so you rent these? He's like, yeah. I'm like, I do something similar. And he's like, oh, no way. And then we just started exchanging stories. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, I am learning so much from you right now on how you're running your business.
Yeah.
And he was so kind to me. He offered a discount. He even let me stay a couple of days for free because he knows there's a gap between the time he wanted me to move in.
Yeah.
So just from our relationship, just what we established, it turned out to be really good. Yeah.
That's great. And see, I'm glad you brought that up too, because like me and Niles is also talking about, like, you can learn something from everybody. It's just depending on, it's up to you if you're learning how to do something or how not to do something, right? So for that, like, that was like, because you've been around here shopping around looking for Airbnbs and properties and stuff to rent out while you're here, and that was a good example of you learning something from somebody that you could grow on. But you also had experiences with people where you was like, I could teach you so much, and you could be running an Airbnb so much better. So there's always those two sides of constantly trying to figure out what you're learning from some people. And that's the good thing about getting into this game. Like when you're out there now, it's so easy for you to spot things like that for those people. So was it books? Was it just getting out there? Not like, how did you obtain knowledge so you could spot those little techniques?
A lot of the things that I did early on to learn the basics was soak in as many YouTube videos as possible. Okay. I'm huge on Audible, and I could read, but that would take me forever. And a lot of these books become outdated. Yeah. The reason I like Audible or like YouTube is that people that are doing YouTube and content creation, they're doing it live as they're doing their business. So you're kind of in the forefront with them. So I started actually following a few people that were doing Airbnbs. And every time that I've wanted to learn something, whether it was long-term rentals, short-term rentals, the first thing I ask myself is, okay, what do you know? And I'll write it down. And what are you missing that's making you feel uncomfortable about jumping into Airbnb or getting a long-term rental with like house hacking? And whatever that is, I'll make notes of it, and then I have like basically things to shoot at now and to start like conquering and like to like learn what I need to know. Yeah. And once you learn it, if you still feel a little bit unease, which has happened to me as well, I'll find a mentor. Yeah. And I'll pay them a couple $100 to like learn their course or whatever. And a lot of the times it goes back to relationships. A lot of the mentors I've had, they enjoyed teaching me so much, and the fact that I give back because I actually show up. I'm not just paying. Some people pay and never come back, and they're so used to it. So when they see somebody that's like really into what they're teaching, they're willing to help you out, look over your deals. You could like, hey, I have this. Do you think it'll work? My first Airbnb was done that way. I had a mentor that I was only paying $100 a month on Patreon, and I would have him pretty much on speed dial. I would send him deals. He run it through his calculator, and he was the one that was like, your Denver home would be an amazing Airbnb. Yeah. So after that, it was just like, well, you've taught me everything. Now I got to go out and apply this stuff. Yeah. And the application is the second part of it. By applying it and really learning the nuances of what you've been taught, then you start spotting it when other people are doing it differently. Because you could start comparing, and then sometimes they'll be doing something better, and you're like, oh, I could adopt that. So, yeah.
So go and learn, apply it, and practice it, and then that's going to help you be able to point out goods and the bads of other people's techniques and stuff. Okay. So what are some things people should be looking into for their first property? If they're trying to say, okay, I want to get into Airbnb and this and that, what is something realistically they need to be looking for their first property that's not going to set them up to fail?
So ideally, it depends on what they're trying to do. Right. So when I first did my first property, I was just trying to get into my first home. But I knew I could Airbnb the extra bedrooms, and I could potentially live rent-free. Okay. So that was my goal. So that worked out great because in my mind, it's like, okay, I'm going to live in it regardless. And if someone else is paying for the mortgage, that's a great way for me to limit risks. Because if things go south or the Airbnb doesn't work, I could still rent out those rooms long-term. Or I have to pay the full mortgage, but it's still my home. I still own it, and I had enough money saved up in the bank. So it's just like the least amount of risk I can take. If you have a lot of money, your deal might be getting into multifamily. Yeah. And buying in a big like 8-unit. And when you're doing that, you're able to scale tremendously because now you have the same cleaner for multiple units. You're not hiring different cleaners. So then you can hire by the hour, which will lower your cost. And then if you're staying in one of the rooms, you're living for free then too. So there's so many different ways of doing it. I always like to sit down with people and get an idea of like, okay, where are you? What are you thinking? And then that way we could kind of create a path for them to kind of plan out and start to kind of like put the stepping stones to get them there.
Absolutely. Because I know I've heard from a lot of people with the real estate and the Airbnb places, like they go get multifamily places or apartments where they might get 4, and then they'll live in one, and then they'll start renting out the other ones. And until they get everything rented out, they're not going to go live somewhere else because they say, like you said, your points. You can pay people to clean it a lot easier. You have no travel if you have to do maintenance. If you're doing the maintenance yourself, you're already right there. You can monitor your places, making sure they're good and cleaned up, that you don't have any bad tenants destroying and stuff because you're right there physical. So, and that's what I've heard from a lot of people starting off that way because you're already there, and the goal is to at some point have those rented out, your place rented out, and then you can go move on to the next property once you got that fully filled. Yeah,
and that's where I'm at the Airbnb journey now. The properties I was buying one once a year, and I was Airbnbing them. But then I realized there's also the arbitrage game, which is like a different way of doing Airbnb, and that's the way the guy was doing it, where you sublease, you take that lease, and then you re-rent it. And by doing that, for those people that are like, I don't have a lot of money to buy a home, I don't have this much cash, that's a great thing. It's like, well, you don't need that much. You probably only need $3,000 to $5,000 to deposit, first month's rent, and you just need to furnish it. And if it's condo or if it's a 1-unit, that's not that much money. It is, but you could save it up in like a year or two, get into your first one, like you said, where you kind of live in it, you furnish it, you start it, and then you move to the next unit. And a lot of times when the landlord sees you doing an amazing job, 1, it's less headache for them because they're not managing people. 2, because you're constantly turning it over and keeping it clean, it's not getting destroyed by a long-term tenant at all. And when the long-term tenant moves out, usually the paint gets chipped, there's damages in the bathroom, there's things that they have to do to get it back up to speed that takes 1 or 2 months worth of fixing. So they're out of income for 1 or 2 months, where with you, they're never out of income because you could just renew the lease. And it was hilarious because my landlord came in one time and I'm like, can I show you the room? And she's like, why? I'm like, I just want you to see something. We're like 6 months into it because I'm trying to like build rapport. Right. And I showed her, and then she walks in. She's like, wow, this looks the same. She's like, it looks so nice though. And I'm like, yeah, that's the point. I'm like, you don't have to worry about that upkeep with me, because, and at any point that you feel like, you know what, this doesn't work for me, I'm not going to go to court with you and like for a lawsuit because I don't want to move out, because for me, it's a business.
Yeah.
So if you don't want to do business with me anymore, all I have to do is either sell the furniture or take the furniture to another place that wants to do business with me. And it just gets you in and out really, really easily.
That's a good point there, because it is of a less of a stress there, because it makes it business now, right? So eviction or don't want to do that stuff no more. Like, okay, cool. Now I already got, because even if you do lose that property, you still have your investment in the furniture that you have there for the next one. So the next startup is just, okay, rent, deposit, good. I already got the furniture. So absolutely. So what are the key factors to consider when investing in real estate and Airbnb purposes?
One of the biggest things I've learned is really getting to know the market.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is not only knowing how to price a unit and how much each unit would go for, but understanding the city laws and how they manage Airbnb. Phoenix, for example, they make you get a license, but they're not super strict about it. Denver is different. Denver requires you to have it as your primary residence, and you're supposed to live in it. So with me, that's the same reason why I've kept it as my primary residence. But a lot of Airbnbs in Denver, you can't just start buying properties and Airbnb them. People have.
Yeah.
But ideally, the city likes to make sure that, you know, the locals still get a share of the market in terms of like the real estate that's available. And then Myrtle Beach, I have one there as well in South Carolina. That's a different ballgame whatsoever, because they actually have Airbnb zones where you cannot buy outside of that zone and make it a short-term rental property. Okay. People have done it. I've seen them pop up. But if you want to make sure you stay in good standing with the state to keep the business running, I suggest just buy it where you can, and then just make your money the right way, because the game is doing it the long term, you know? Right. That's kind of the play. So yeah, in South Carolina and in Florida too. Florida has that as well, where there's specific areas where you're not allowed to get Airbnbs, and there's specific areas that you can't have Airbnbs.
Yeah, because we was talking about this a little bit downstairs as well, is that, like, you know, in certain states, after your first year lease, your rent goes up 4, 5, 10% after your first lease. So, like, understanding the market of where you want to be, because for me, that was a new shock, because Oklahoma don't do that. Oklahoma don't upcharge your rent. What I pay rent on year 1 is what I'm going to pay in rent year 5, you know? So that was something to, like, when I was starting to get into the real estate and Airbnb stuff, just to realize learning that market, because not every state has the same rules, don't have the same laws, zoning and all that. So you got to know what you're trying to, overall, what you're trying to obtain by doing this, your overall goal, but also knowing the market that you're trying to sell in and their rules and laws.
Yeah, exactly.
What are some legal considerations that real estate investors should be aware of when operating Airbnb properties?
Definitely the things we just spoke about with the laws. I've known how it breaks my heart, man. There's been people that will buy a property and have gone through all the struggles of learning how to buy the property and put down their money, but they never checked with the city if they can do it, or the area they bought it in. And then they find out that they won't allow them to do it. And and the thing is, a lot of people too is like, there's a safe way of doing Airbnb too, where you could buy it and you could do the calculations for it as a long-term unit. Yeah. In the case that it doesn't work as a short-term unit, you could always convert it. But a lot of people were doing it super risky, where they were just doing the numbers for long-term. So then when they can't even do it now, they can't even break even with long-term. Yeah. They were getting into some bad deals because of that. They were, I mean, on paper, they looked amazing. Yeah. But when you can't do it, it was sad.
Yeah, no, yeah, it broke my heart. Because you put all that work, all that timing and planning and investing money to figure out everything you was working towards you can't do. So it not only gets heartbreaking, but it almost, for a lot of people, it demotivates them and makes them not want to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, you definitely got to research, know what you're doing and all that. So you were saying that, like, you used to watch YouTube videos, or you still watch YouTube videos and look for mentors. So who is some people that you would suggest for people like me that's trying to get into it and don't fully understand, to go watch to start trying to get some understanding?
I would really start just trying to understand real estate investing in general, because that'll slowly pivot you towards Airbnb. But one of the biggest companies, and I used to work for them, they're called Bigger Pockets. They set you up with the foundation where by the time you finish reading some of their books or listen to some of their podcasts, you'll know the ins and outs pretty well. And the great thing about them is that they interview and they bring in people from all walks of life in real estate, whether it's long term, whether it's luxury, whether it's short term. So you really get to understand of like, where do you fit into the puzzle, whether it's wholesaling. So I would tell people to start there with Bigger Pockets. That's a great place to start. And then at that point, if you want to get into Airbnb, they have a few Airbnb guests that you can start kind of jumping into. And in my opinion, who you pick is going to be mostly who goes more with your style of learning and their personality. Yeah. So I usually tell people kind of to go off of that, do some research on them. And if it all kind of works out, then just take them on as a mentor.
Okay, so when you get in like these rentals, like we were talking earlier, like down in Oklahoma, I know there's people that go get apartments and then furnish them and then put them on Airbnbs and rent them out. So when you go and do that, do you just run it under your name, or you run it under an LLC? Does every apartment going to allow you to put it under an LLC?
So my mentor, her name is Avery, so she's my mentor. She did it here in Miami, actually, believe it or not. Yeah. But she was doing so well that she moved to Costa Rica, and she's doing it in Costa Rica now. She does international Airbnbs. Wow. But she taught me from the start to do it with an LLC. When she was mentoring me, I remember approaching her. I'm like, I got these properties, and then she's like, okay, let's start the contract. And I was like, wait, what? And she's like, we need the contract with your company that you have. And I was like, oh, I was pretending I was gonna live in it. And she's like, no, you don't want to start off with pretending that it's for you, because you're already setting up a bad relationship with the landlord, because you're kind of lying. And if they find out and they're unhappy, you don't want to deal with those headaches.
Yeah, it's not a good way to do business.
It's not. So she was like, so we're going to do this again. You're going to tell them never mind, and you're going to start over, and you're going to now start approaching people as a business. And she's like, plus you have a few long-term rentals already. So it's like you have a resume to show people like, hey, I have some experience under my belt. So right after that, I started my LLC in Phoenix. It didn't cost me more than like $300. And I started approaching people basically as an LLC, as a company. And people take you way more serious too, because they understand like, okay, he's actually here to do business. He has some experience. I've seen some of his Airbnbs. And a lot of the time, you're not convincing them to Airbnb. You're convincing them that you're going to allow short-term rentals for professionals. And that's how I sell it, because we don't allow partying at our Airbnb. We try to target the late 20, early 30 demographic, whether it's travel nurses, engineers, that kind of stuff. So then that allows you to list it on multiple platforms, not just Airbnb. So we actually operate through Booking.com, VRBO, Airbnb, Furnish Finder, and like so many other things. And there's even like event websites where like stuff like this, where they need a place for podcasting. Yeah. You'd be surprised. You could have a really nice setup like this, and you might be living life in Miami. People will pay you a couple $100 for a couple hours just to come over and be like, hey, you want to do the podcast at my place? Yeah. You guys could rent it out for like a certain amount of time. And you'll make money doing that too. Yeah, because because like you said, we're in Airbnb right now, right? Yeah. So we came out here, and that's what I was doing. It's like when I was looking through all the Airbnb's places, I was like, I'm gonna be filming here, so I need to make sure I got a good backdrop. I got this, I got that, and like when I was coming and I was Airbnb, and I was upfront with them, like, look, I'm coming here, like it's travel, but I am gonna be filming here, content, this and that. And that was their biggest thing first, was like, no parties, right? We're not gonna do this. Yeah. And it's like, no parties, none of that stuff. It's gonna be good. We're gonna take care of the property and everything. So, but yeah, no, it's I can see that, because that's exactly what I'd be looking for when I go travel someplace. Like, I need a place that I can film. Yeah. So with furnishing the apartments, is there any tricks, techniques of like, are you trying to look for stuff to make it more eye catching? Because like I know
taking photos at the Airbnbs, a lot of that is like your big seller. For like me, for content creating, like on YouTube, thumbnails. You got to have the thumbnails right? So for you, those photos are what is going to sell, because that's the only first impression they're going to get of it. So how do you go about figuring out how to furnish each apartment? And do you just take the photos on your phone? Do you have somebody come in and take professional photos for you? How do you navigate that?
So that's been the beauty about understanding the market, right? So like when we started the Airbnb in Myrtle Beach in South Carolina, we went there, and I have a background in design and architecture. I did some of that in community college, but I remember getting there, and a lot of their design was very old school, you know, kind of 90s, kind of stuck there, boardwalk on the beach kind of feel. I'm from LA.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm like, oh, we have a beach too, but we make things pop, and we make things really stand out with color, and we really try to like kind of give you that Instagram, take a selfie type of feel to things. So right away, I'm like, okay, so what would stand out here? I'm like, well, shoot, what about a beach Barbie house? And my girlfriend was like, at the time, she was like, there's no way that's going to work. They're like, the locals are not going to like this. And I'm like, but it's not for the locals. It's not for the locals. I'm like, it's for the people visiting. And those are the people from Florida, New York, internationally. So they're going to get a feel of the LA lifestyle, but in Myrtle Beach. So that was the design choices we made. So for that particular property, we ended up spending an extra couple, $1,000 to make sure that it popped a little bit more, and we had the right furniture and the right setting.
Okay.
But it's printing so much money because like we expected more. And the great thing about it is that the houses around me, unfortunately, I didn't buy them when they went up on sale at the time, which I wish I did. But they're kind of in direct competition with me, and we're blowing them out the water because literally of the aesthetic of the way we make the place look. A place like Phoenix, for example, it's closer to residential. It's more like that apartment sublease type of experience that people get.
Yeah.
We don't have to be super fancy. A lot of the people there that rent are local sometimes, that are in between homes. A lot of the times, the only times we get the tourist time is usually during the winter or spring months.
Okay.
So you could keep it a little bit more mellow, and it'll make sense for that market because you don't have to be extra to kind of show off. You're not by the beach trying to sell that beach experience. So every market has a different thing that you could do to it with it. But if you do it right, you should be able to budget it into your expenses, and you should never overdo it as well. So there's always a fine line. You have to make sure that the furniture, when you're buying it, like what is the resale value? You want to make sure you don't pay twice. That's a huge thing. Some people are trying to, I wouldn't say cut corners, but a lot of people are like, oh, this couch is $250. I'm like, yeah, but it's going to break in like 2 months.
Bro, I'm glad you brought that, because like that couch there, like they did a beautiful job setting up this one. Whoever did it, they did a good job. But I came in here, I was like, oh, cool looking couch. But like the backrest like moves and bends back and all that stuff. It does all this little cool fancy stuff. And I was like, oh, this is great. I started filming, taking pictures over a couch. So like little things like that does make it different for aesthetic. So I guess the main point is understand the market you're at, and understand the people you're trying to market to come stay there. Okay. So every place is going to be a little different from what you're trying to bring them in. So you might be in one place and people understanding why people travel there for reasons and set up. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
And you might get away with like, having really basic things. A lot of people that Airbnb will do that, and they're in a great location like Miami, and it won't matter because it's Miami, But at the same time, when you're in competition with so many people, your first photo is going to really stand out. And if your first photo just looks amazing because of all the stuff you have on there, there's more likely going to click on it to look at first, because at the end of the day, you're fighting for eyeballs. Yeah. And you do want to stand out to some degree to some people. Yeah.
Okay. So what are some mistakes early people getting into Airbnb and real estate usually make right off the jump? What are some common mistakes?
So I've made a few mistakes myself. So with the Myrtle Beach home, you could only project as much as you think you'll need in terms of like startup costs. But mistakes I made, for example, is like I didn't budget for the water heater breaking a week into us buying the property. I didn't, have money saved up for the AC busting 2 months into buying the property. Even though it all cleared out during inspection and I did my due diligence, you end up overspending a little bit on furniture, which was what I did. That money that I had that was supposed to be for reserves, and then things started to happen. I'm like, oh man, I definitely needed that. So going forward, it's like, okay, if you're going to spend a little bit extra on the furniture, still have that money ready for things like that when they happen, so that you're not stressing out about it. It just adds a little extra headache. So kind of being a little bit more prepared and like being a little bit more aware that things will happen. It's real estate. No matter what, every other month, something will happen that will need to be fixed. A couch got broken, drywall, and it's always kind of having a good team also in place. The first time that I was doing the Myrtle Beach home, I also did the mistake of not contacting multiple contractors. It was the first one where we actually ripped out the floor and we set up new, like, really nice vinyl that looked like tile. And it looked beautiful. But when I started looking at, after I already had paid the guy and I started looking at other contractors, I realized, like, oh man, I could have shaved off quite a bit for the same amount of work. So doing your due diligence in terms of contacting multiple contractors, contacting multiple handyman, and making sure that you're getting good value, but for the right price. That's really important.
Yes. So it's kind of within budgeting, you're not just budgeting for what it's going to cost you and how to furnish it. You also need to set back for emergency. Because like you said, bro, I came from plumbing. You're not going to know when that thing's going to go out.
Exactly.
You never know.
Yep.
We've had some that, like, you get, what, I think 5-year warranties on them now, I think is what it is. And sometimes you'll go put them in, you'll come back a month later, and they're like, the pilot light's out, or the heating element's not working, this and this and that. Or you got somebody that might come and put that thing in, didn't know what they're doing, and they done burnt all the elements out before you even got there. So it's kind of just, all right, so you budget for what's it going to take to start up, but then you also have budget there for emergency costs that come up too. For not even that maybe people move out and damage the properties.
Exactly.
So if you came across that where people's damaging properties and then you had to go back and try to fix them up, and how do you navigate that and try to select the right tenants that they're not going to destroy your property?
Yeah, well, that's another thing too. It's like with the arbitrage, for example, one thing we do also now that we know better is if we're not buying the place, if we're just arbitraging, we actually hire an inspector to come in and check out the unit beforehand. Because my mentor, thanks to her, she made those mistakes. And that's another great thing about having a mentor. She made the mistake of just taking it at face value. Yeah. And the toilet busted and the plumbing busted. And it wasn't her fault. It was just old because, and even the plumber said that. But she was Airbnb-ing it. It's the business. So it looks like, no, this is your problem to deal with. So she taught me that, like, not only getting a contractor to look at it when you're buying, but doing it when you're subleasing. And then in the contract, I mean, with the actual landlord, having a base in terms of, like, any cost above this much, you take care of. Any cost below this much, we'll take care of. So any drywall issues, those small things we'll do. Anything big with, like, the AC, the fridge, those type of things that give out, the landlord takes care of it. And you start to mitigate your risk by learning how to take on the responsibility that you're willing to take on. Okay. For me, that's been one of the biggest game changers. And then in terms of, like, finding the right contractor when you're actually doing it for your personal place, a lot of the times my agent, if you have a really, really good agent, because they deal with so many other real estate investors, they have all those contacts at hand. Okay. So a lot of the times asking agents, like, hey, who would you recommend for these kind of jobs? They could shoot you a couple of contacts. And then from there, it's relationships. Like you said, you just kind of talk to them, figure it out. And then at least at that point, you start getting base points of prices. Yeah. And then you could start calling up people to compare and see who's BSing and who's actually legit, essentially. Okay. Yeah.
All right. So it's almost like even when you're Airbnb and you're still trying to treat it like a new house. You want to get it inspected. You want to make sure it's all right for you. Get the right contractors and then do your research on them as well. So you know you're not getting because there's a lot of people out there that do blue collar work, plumbing, stuff like that, and they'll sound like they know what they're doing, but then don't know what they're doing, and then put you up in a worse situation than you was when they showed up. So definitely know that field and know what you need to be doing. That's good to know. That's good. Okay, let's go. What are the emerging trends in the Airbnb market, and how can investors adapt to stay ahead?
So one of the biggest trends that I'm seeing more and more often is luxury homes. A lot of people that have been in the game for a while are now gravitating towards getting big luxury homes because you could make so much more money from it. And then the little guy, what I am, is like I stay away from those because I'm not going to compete. But what I can do is find ways to now funnel this property by designing it well and connecting it to social media. And in doing that, you could actually market your actual Airbnb like a real business through TikTok, through Instagram. My actual Airbnb has a Instagram page, and it has a couple thousand users, and then you're able to funnel your guests through that because now you're able to tell them like, hey, check out our Instagram page. If you want to send us any photos, we'll be happy to post them. And you make it very, very friendly in that sense. And before you know it, they're now recommending your Airbnb through the Instagram, or they're actually now, you could offer like a discount code for people that are leaving. A lot of the times I like to do that. Like, hey, if you ever want to come back, or any friend of yours, let them know and we will offer them a discount just because you were such an amazing guest. And that is a great way of building rapport and then building social proof with everyone that's online.
That's a good point, bro, because I've went through so many Airbnbs, especially when I was moving and changing and relocating. I've yet to have one Airbnb place offer me a discount if I come stay again. And guess what? How many of those have I repeated to? None of them. I haven't went back to none of them yet. So that would be returned. Like if they offered me a discount, I absolutely would come back.
Yeah, and
absolutely.
It's amazing because like when we started doing that at the time, I'm like, I don't know if this is gonna work because it had been a few months and we didn't see anything like gravitating to. But a year later with the Denver property, we're getting I saw the guest book, and I'm like, because it's funny because sometimes Airbnb doesn't refresh the entire old message thread. So I'm like, wait, is this the same person? And it is. And it's amazing because they're like, oh, we remember your place. We want to come back. We had such a great experience. Hearing that one warms my heart because it just makes me realize like you're doing a good job and you're really, really providing value to these people.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's a hospitality business, and that's how I like to see it. You're providing a great experience for them to have a vacation with their family, and they're going to be memories that they're hopefully never going to forget. So if you're able to do that successfully and offer them any sort of discount or, intrigue them to want to come back, a lot of the times they will take that option.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's one way right there and he just gave y'all some good gems right there. There's one way right there that you can get ahead of the market in the game, because I definitely ain't seen nobody do that yet. And I promise you, if I leave this Airbnb and they offer me a discount, if I come stay again, you best believe the next time I'm in Miami, I'm gonna be here. You promise you that.
Yeah, yep.
So, hitting on that subject and staying on that topic as well, how do you handle guest reviews and feedbacks to maintain a positive reputation on Airbnb? So you talked about how you got positive remarks, but how do you go if you get a negative remark? How do you figure out how to make your place better for the next guest?
So I always take criticism as a way to improve my business. There's times where you're going to get the Karens that just want to complain. And when you have those type of guests, if we want to get started with that, all you can do is do your best. And at the end of the day, they're going to probably still give you that 1-star review. There's been guests that have done that, or there'll be guests that won't complain at all. And at the end, bring a list of complaints right before they leave. I'm like, oh, I wish you would have told me. I could have easily restocked that for you. It would have taken me less than like 5 minutes. My cleaners would have been over. And they're like, well, it's too late. I'm like, well, yeah. I know.
Yeah, you didn't address it when.
So I've learned the hard way to not take those negative guests to heart because they're going to happen. It's part of the business. And when it happens, it's not a shot at how hard you work. That doesn't determine your value. You're going to have guests that are like that, and you got to keep rolling with the punches. And the good stars prove that. When you're almost getting 5 stars every single time, it proves it. So a lot of the times there are guests that definitely start off on a bad foot because our cleaners one time got into a car accident. They were running late. It was like the worst thing. It was Denver, very icy. So we had to deploy different cleaners. So the guests got there while they were still cleaning. So we offered them complimentary bottle of wine. We offered them little things here or there, and they notice those things. Any tiny thing that ever happens, like, your trash bags are a little bit low, or this and that. Immediately, I'll deploy my cleaners or one of my teammates, and they'll go to the house. They'll get extra blankets. They'll bring more than they need, more towels, and those kind of things really sit with them. And by the time they leave what seemed to be a mediocre maybe experience because of how it started, we end up getting a 5-star review, which is the amazing part.
That's good. So yeah, because you can always, a lot of people always take negatives as, it's just Karens and all that. So, but you do have to differentiate when somebody's just being nitpicky and trying to do stuff. But when somebody's actually making it a concern that's reasonable, and then trying to accommodate them to that. Because it's good that you do that. Because, bro, I've been through a lot of Airbnbs, and they mess up in things, and they never want to accommodate me for nothing.
The best ones, too, are the ones that, after, they'll be like, it's not a complaint, but, we made pizza. We love making pizza. You didn't have a pizza cutter, or somebody would be like, you didn't have a toaster. We were here for more than 3 weeks. And you start to think, I'm like, yeah, I guess someone that's there longer term would like a toaster. So you start buying these things that they're recommending. And then I always reply to them, or even shoot them a picture like, hey, we bought what you were saying. Thanks a lot. Your feedback's going to make our Airbnb way better. I really appreciate it. That guest to guest communication, because we usually give our review 2 days after. So a lot of the times they'll reach out privately to let you know what you could improve on, because it's part of our messaging system. Usually before they check out, we give them all the rules, like checkout rules, all those good things.
Yeah.
But we ask for feedback right then and there. And we're like, hey, if there's anything we could have done better, let us know, because your feedback is going to make the experience better for people going forward. And the people that take time to do that, we appreciate it every time. And we actually show them right away, like, hey, we're taking care of this. Thank you so much. And they love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's great. Because for Facebook, I have a group on there that's called Home and Life Hacks. And basically, when I go to Airbnbs, a place like this, I'll take photos, I take videos of certain things, and then I post it to highlight those places. And I know, and I have a few that I work with, and even with this, last time I was like, hey, we're going to film here. It's you're going to be able to do some publicity for it? Absolutely, we got you. That's it. So I go to these places, then I film, and then it's also bringing them traffic to them as well, because I'm constantly posting these places on social media, telling people, and they're like, where are you at, how'd you get here? And then driving them traffic that way. So, and I do that through all that pages, so people might see a beautiful place of how, in this area, take a shot of somewhere, and they're like, man, that's just so beautiful. And you're like, oh, there it is. So when we talk a lot of times, man, you got Airbnbs, man, send them my way, I'll put that on the page for you, get some more traffic that way. Because it's just always trying to, because sometimes it's hard to get it filled up, because I know some people will have Airbnbs, but then they're not getting bookings. So what's the main cause for a lot of people if they got an Airbnb and they're just not getting bookings?
A lot of the times is also not understanding the market in terms of when the slow season is. For example, when I first bought Myrtle Beach, it wasn't a mistake. I knew this beforehand, actually. We were buying in July, but we didn't close till August because I had to go to Europe and I took a vacation. So we postponed closing. But in doing that, I knew I'm missing the summer money. I'm getting towards the tail end of it. So we're going to be hitting the slow months right away, because in Myrtle Beach, I call it zombie town in terms of it's just dead. You go visit November, December, you'll get your family locals that'll party for the holidays and it'll rent your place.
Yeah.
But it's empty. It's really empty. So having an understanding of that, of if you're starting it, are you approaching the hot season or the cold season? And some people sometimes don't understand. They're approaching the cold season, and then they hit those rough months and they're out of business because they didn't have enough in reserves. A lot of the times what you want to do, and a lot of times what people do too, is they'll go through the hot season and they'll spend all that money because they're like, hey, we're making so much. It's like this all year round.
Yeah.
And then the slow season comes and it destroys them because they didn't keep any of that money in reserve. So you're almost averaging what you make throughout the year versus looking at it at a month-to-month basis. And then in doing that, you're able to predict what happens if you're not going to get booked or if you are.
Okay.
And then at that point, once you figure that out, then you're playing the pricing game at that point. Okay. If you're not getting booked, how much can you discount it to still make some money? And you start playing with the price quite a bit. And that alone during the slow season has saved me, understanding how to do the pricing.
Are the pictures that big of a deal? Like, people just go get Airbnb? Should they go through and take pictures with their cell phone, or should they hire a professional to come get shots for them?
So I've always had a professional come take shots for me. There was a time where I thought the iPhone camera was enough, and it is. It really is. You could take amazing pictures, but you still should edit them on Photoshop. You should still make sure it's during the right time of the day, you know, when the sun is setting or when it's coming out in the morning. That hour or two is like the best lighting, the natural lighting. And if you open up the windows, you'll get amazing shots of your property, especially on the outside. Yeah, the golden hour look. So, and that applies for the inside and outside of the house. And once I learned that, I actually took a Udemy course to start learning how to do the photography. And that paid off so well. Yeah. And once I started learning how to do it, I didn't want to focus too much on the editing, but I'm like, I got the angles, I have the shots. Now, if you don't want to pay for a photographer, you could pay for an editor, and they'll edit it the hell out of it, and you'll still get really, really nice photos, even with an iPhone.
Yeah, and that's what I say. Like, the iPhone will do what it needs to do, but it's not the equipment that's going to make the photo. It's the person behind the camera, how to angle, how to light, and all that stuff. So just because you got an iPhone or a good camera doesn't mean you can do it either. That little keen eye of a photographer sometimes comes in handy to give you that aesthetic look that just stands out to people more. What are the key differences between long-term rentals and short-term rentals in terms of profitability and management?
Ooh, that's a good one. So... My God. So, okay, to start off, the whole thing is like, people have always claimed that Airbnb is like passive income. Yeah. And like, same thing with long-term rentals. Long-term rentals are more so passive income. Short-term rentals, there's no such thing as passive income. Whoever is telling you that is lying to you, because it is a lot more involved and busy. Yes, can you automate certain parts of the business? 100%. But when you're first starting, there's so much to learn and so much to do that you kind of have to have your hands in it. Once you're scaling and you're getting enough revenue to start offloading and automating some of the things like management, then you could do it. But in the beginning, I would never tell someone to hire a manager for Airbnb, because they'll charge 20 to 30% of whatever profits you make. And if it's during the slow season and you're basically making like $100 cash flow, they're making 20 to 30% of the total that you made. So you might end up in the red. So learning and that's another thing, learning the market, learning the seasons, learning all that stuff, so that by the time you hire a manager, you also know, are you really worth what you're asking for? And for long-term rental, it's not as bad, because that you could hire a property management company. It's like 10%, probably less sometimes, because all they're doing is finding a tenant and charging the tenant throughout the year. Okay. That's it.
And I would take it as like slow, and like, you know, the hot times are going to be depending on the thing. So like for Florida, the hot time's going to be like the summertime, right? But if you got some places in Denver or Utah, the winter might be the season for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so understanding that marketing, understand why people come there. Make sure you're not getting above of your head, budgeting properly for not only the deposit, but to pay for it, and to have the furnishing of it, and to have the backup for the emergency release, right?
Yep.
So you make sure that you set up properly here. Okay, I got you. That's good. Are there specific property features or amenities that tend to attract more guests or command higher rental rates on Airbnb?
100%. So this is one thing I don't have. But if you have a pool, usually that brings in a huge crowd. I decided not to get a pool because there's also the management of having a pool, which could be very expensive. So because of that, I stay away from it. Yeah. But it's a huge money-making machine if you provide a jacuzzi, a pool. There are certain things that you could provide guests that make it a little bit more enticing for people to book, for sure.
I think that, like to your point, that would be antagonizing to people, or, you know, want to come and check that out. But also, like, it might provoke some people to go want to throw parties more.
That too, yeah.
How do you try to, like, because I know, like, with Airbnb, you send in a request to get the place, and then, the landlord or the owner of that property will decide whether or not they want to let you in there. So what are some measures that you use to figure out if somebody's going to treat your property with respect, or they're just going to trash it and you're just like, no?
I think the biggest thing that we've done, our Myrtle Beach property has been the first one where a lot of kids under 21, because of the way we made it look, try to book it now. But recently, actually, Airbnb cracked down on the partying. They actually have officially released it, and all the hosts were excited about this. They officially released a statement where it's part of their policy now, where guests are not technically allowed to have parties at these Airbnbs. And BRVO and all the other ones were already doing it, so they were the kind of the last ones to jump on board.
Oh, okay.
But every time somebody that is under the age of 21, technically you only have to be 18, they reach out and they ask me like, hey, or other families will reach out and they'll be like, hey, we're thinking of throwing this kind of party, but we're not going to have the party at the house. We're going to party outside. It's my bachelorette party, for example, or I'm graduating from high school, so my friends are going to do this. With the people that are younger, we're like, okay, we are just going to be completely transparent with you. Airbnb doesn't allow partying, and these are our house rules. And anything that happens to the property, you are 100% liable for it. Not your friends, not anyone else. It's you, the person on the reservation. That'll either scare them and they will go away and try to find an owner that's like a little bit more lenient, or a lot of them are fully responsible and we've never had a problem with it. So I think setting up the boundaries and like having an understanding with the guests always sets you up for success at the end of the day. People that are throwing the bachelor parties, for example, and stuff like that, they have reached out, and a lot of the times we've had parties where like they complain that we didn't do enough for them or something like that. The cool thing about some of these platforms, they let you reply to the comments. And one of the guests that complained, they're like, they were so rude to us. They were watching us the whole time because we're allowed to have security cameras outside the property just for protection.
Right.
And we replied with, no, you said you were showing up with 6 guests and you showed up with 12 people and you guys were super rowdy outside. Our neighbors complained. And in actually replying honestly to those negative reviews, it actually shows other people that are looking at your property. It's like, oh, no, they're a good property and they have bad guests, but there's a reason for it. And when they reach out, they'll be like, hey, we have this many people. We promise we won't throw a party, because they'll go back and they'll mention that comment. So it's the best thing ever when we know like they're reading the reviews and they're reading the bad ones. And because we reply and we're actually engaging and putting out our truth of what actually is happening, they take it more serious. So when they reach out and ask the questions about the parties, the bachelorette, stuff like that, they come with an understanding of they're not going to let us get away with all this crap, and they're going to set rules and we have to follow them. And usually that works really well.
Yeah. Cause at the end of the day, you're a business. So when people put a review like that in that situation, no, you need to go back and you need to defend your character and defend your property. So people know it's like, oh, cause it's when they put that, it sounds like, oh, they spying on people. They got cameras everywhere. What do you mean they just watching? You gotta go back in there like, no, you did this, and you're like, oh, okay, no, they're a respectable, understanding owner. Because if I was in your shoes, I would have done the same thing. That's exactly it. So replying back to that is something that is great, because I know some platforms don't let you, and then you can just get a bad review and it just looks bad on you.
Especially when you're just starting off, that could sink your business. So like to us, it's like even when we reply, as mad as I've had people help me and be my digital assistants and they do the messaging, and they want to just say something, and I'm like, no, we're going to reply, but we're going to reply in a very professional manner. Yeah. And we're going to show respect above all else, because regardless of how they are, we're not going to change how we operate. Yes. And in doing that, it just helps our business tremendously.
Absolutely. That's great, because like at the end of the day, they're personal, you're a business. You still have to be professional no matter how unprofessional they are being. Yeah. And that's almost like, for me, if I see someone that's going crazy on somebody and about their Airbnb or any product, and you're talking and then the person that's complaining is being highly disrespectful, and yet that other person is still able to be professional, I'm with it.
Yeah.
I'm sold at that point because I know that no matter what, that you know this is a business and you're going to handle everything professionally. Even because for some people, as soon as somebody gets unprofessional or gets crazy, oh, we go there. I can be right there with you. I can do it better than you. It's like that. That's never a good look for you. It's never.
There's been people too that like in between it all, they'll start threatening us like, you know, we're gonna get our money back. We're gonna take this to court. Like they've gotten so intense, and I cut that off immediately. I'm like, look, we don't have to do this. You know, you don't have to stay at our property. I'd be willing to just give you a refund so you could go somewhere else. And I just say that with full respect. I'm like, look, if you're that unhappy, I will take the loss. I will give you your money back, and that way you'll find another place, and we'll work something out with you. And immediately they're like, well, we don't want to find another place. And it's like, because they want a discount, or they just want to take advantage of the host.
Yes.
And so setting up those boundaries up front, even when they're very, very pushy and they're being like not the greatest guest to have, it sets the boundary. And at the end of the day, a lot of the time, those guests, when they realize they can't mess with the host that way, they won't even leave a review. But that's better for us because we probably don't want their review anyway, so it helps us out too.
Okay, so set up your rules and your boundaries and stay firm in them but respectful with
Exactly.
them. That's good points. Absolutely. So I also like to ask this because we do this a lot. We read, especially in the CEO network, we're all there trying to read and be better, and we offer books to each other for advice to go read. So what are some books that you would recommend for the viewers to go look at, to read into, to start understanding real estate and Airbnb so they can be taking the right step forward?
I think for me to this day, and it's the book that we started doing in our book club, the first book was Set for Life.
Yeah.
That book, it means a lot to me, not only because of everything you learn from it.
Yeah.
But that book, I read it when I worked for Bigger Pockets, so I got to meet Scott Trench and I worked with him.
Okay.
So seeing him as, you know, who he is and how he carries himself and what he wrote, and seeing that he truly lives that way, was really inspiring to me, and has always stuck with me. Like I had read Rich Dad Poor Dad back when I was younger.
Yeah.
But this book was one of those books that really, really stuck with me because it's like I know the person behind the book.
Yeah.
And it is teaching you all of the basic fundamentals just to get started. And I thought that was an amazing book. So that's one of my favorites. And then my second favorite one is the house hacking book, which would be the next one that I would usually recommend people to read. Because it's a great way of understanding real estate in terms of like, hey, you don't have to own multiple units.
Yeah.
You could start off by just renting a room in your apartment.
Yeah.
And you could start off by just kind of renting your couch. There's people that do that as well. And by having an understanding of that and learning how to manage those simple things, that house hacking book is basically what put me in a position to buy my first home. And it actually taught me how to find tenants, which were my roommates technically, but it allowed me to do all that and do it in a safe way so that I was able to get started with very little risk.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like you can monitor your property right there,
Yeah.
hands on.
Yeah.
They can't destroy it when you're there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's good. And yeah, that Set for Life book, when you recommended it in a group, that's like the first book I read in honestly like 10 years.
Yeah.
And reading that, I was like, that was so eye-opening because it makes you, that book levels everything out to you in such a basic format to like, well, if you're doing this, don't do this. You go do this, cut your corners this way. You're going to have to sacrifice. It's really honest with you and has actual methods in there that you can realistically apply and see changes for. So it's a really good book. Y'all definitely go check that out. Even if you're just trying to learn how to budget and everything, that's a good book for you to understand how to manage your money a lot better as well. Absolutely. Serge, man, I appreciate you coming and doing an interview. Everything. It's been lovely. Y'all make sure y'all check him out. Get all this info. There's a lot of gems in here. Y'all go check out the books. Read those books. If you got any more questions, I'll have all this info in the description so y'all can hit them up and try to get your knowledge and get set up in this Airbnb. So, man, thank you again for coming by.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely,
Thank you so much.